So I think it's on me to kick things off. For those of you who don't know me, welcome. I'm Jason Haas, partner and general manager at Tablas Vineyard, and had the honor of being on the board of directors of the Rhone Rangers for 15 years at this point. One of the things that I am proudest of that we've done as an organization is back in 2013, we created the Lifetime Achievement Award to honor the pioneers of this movement that's still relatively young. And one of the things that I think we're really fortunate for is that most of those pioneers are still with us. You think of the first Lifetime Achievement Award winner back in 2013, it was Randall Graham. He's still doing his thing. We have Bob Lindquist from Coupe, Lindquist Family Wines. He was in 2015. Bill Easton from Domaine de la Terre Rouge, 2016. My dad in 2014, unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but I'm still here. And then in 2017, we did something a little different and honored Sandra Bernstein, who has run the restaurant Girl in the Fig up in Sonoma with an entirely Rhone wine list for more than 2 decades, which again, this is a huge recognition of really service to what is still a pretty young category. So it's incredibly exciting for me to kick off this recognition of Gary Eberle for his work in the Rhone category, the American Rhone category. I have a very fancy engraved decanter that I would like to hand you through the screen of the computer, but that's not work. So we'll have to meet up and I'll give it to you in person. But really, I could not be more honored to be a part of this. But really, I'm just here to make introductions. It is going to be Matt Kettmann, who you see in the blueprint shirt, who is going to be doing the lion's share of the work and really talking in detail about Gary's career. If you don't know Matt, he is contributing editor for The Wine Enthusiast, in charge of the wines of the Central Coast in Southern California. He's a senior editor at the Santa Barbara Independent. He's the author of Vines and Vision, The Winemakers of Santa Barbara County, which was published earlier this year. And what I'm sure is the crowning achievement of his career, he was also the moderator for the Paso Robles Rhone Rangers Experience Winemaker panel back in 2015. So he is uniquely qualified to moderate this. So again, thank you all for being here. Congratulations, Gary, and Matt, take it away.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's good to see you. Haven't seen you in person in a while, as a lot of us can say these days. You were really helpful to me to understanding Paso Robles, when I started covering for the magazine back in 2014. And Gary's been, an inspiration for me and for the whole region and for winemakers around the world. And I remember first meeting Gary at some tasting at some farm up there years ago. And he was the guy that had all these old wines under the table. So it was like, hey, you want to taste some good wines, go around and taste some good wines, and then go find Gary, and he's going to pull some stuff out from under the table. And I think it's a truth that's held, true every time I've seen Gary at any event. He's always got the good stuff under the table. So sorry to blow that secret, but that's good to know for those who visit these events. Gary's in this time of his life when he's just picking up awards. I think this is like the award period of a career. Wine Enthusiast magazine gave Gary our Wine Star Award for American Wine Legend last year. So I got to talk to Gary about that. And what I wrote in that article was, without Gary Eberle, 2 things may not be true today. 1, that Paso Robles is a great place to grow wine grapes. And 2, that Syrah is a great grape to grow around the country and elsewhere. As many of you know, Gary was the pioneer in California, especially in Paso Robles, of taking Syrah and making it its own wine and then promoting the legend of Rhone wines all around the state and around the country. He's lived quite an amazing life, and we're going to hear all about that today. We're also going to taste 5 wines somehow. Gary and I are going to power through these things. So if you have them at home, please join in. I guess without further ado, welcome, Gary. Welcome to your award party. And how are you doing today?
Matt, thank you very much, Jason. I'm doing what I do every day. I'm here 7 days a week. My goal every day is by 1:30 to get out of this office and into what I call my front office, which is at the front door of the winery, and greet people. I'm getting a lot of credit for stuff that I am channeling from Mr. Mondavi, that I learned from him in the 70s and the 80s. And one of them is, hey, you want 78 Syrah, 79 Syrah? I've got them down in my cellar. I mean, he said, especially Cabernet, but my Syrah has always been sort of my, I hate to say it, but it's sort of like my second child. Cabernet is what brought me out of the med school where I was teaching to become an alcoholic. And
and before Jason leaves us, I mean, the whole Tablas Creek is built on Rhones, as we know.
Yeah.
Obviously, this Eberle Syrah back in the day was something that inspired your family, right? I mean, that was kind of proof, proof that this could work in Paso Robles, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I discovered Syrah when I was at Davis. I mean, I had to beg to plant it. I had to beg to get the wood. Thank God for Doc Olmo and also, besides, and for Brian Crozier, because Brian Crozier had come from Australia. He has the Petaluma winery down in Australia, and he had come up to Davis while I was doing my doctoral work. He was getting his master's, and he brought up about, I don't know how many cases of Shiraz and Cabernet Shiraz, and those damn convicts never learned how to spell. That's why they called it Shiraz. But and it piqued my interest, but at the same time, nobody was really interested because it was one of those. And when I talked with Doc Olmo, I said, "Why isn't Syrah?" And he said, "It's we've got everything. We've got Matero, we've got this, we've got that." And somehow Syrah never really made it. There's not a single vineyard of Syrah in the United States. There's a couple vineyards that are mixed plantings. The Christian Brothers had one on Zinfandel Lane, had 4 different grapes in it, along with the worst fan leaf and leaf roll viruses you've ever seen. In fact, Walter Schug made some Syrah because his boss said, he loved it, and I understood that. But 2 years later, the Christian Brothers, pulled that vineyard out and replanted it because it was hideous. But there were 4 different red grapes in there, and I saw when I was looking for Syrah, I said, "Doc Olmo, hey, there's Syrah over here." He said, "Don't think about it. One, you'll never be able to identify which is the Syrah, which is the Zinfandel, which is the Petit, which is the Carrion, and it's badly diseased." And he led me to the Chapoutier clone that he had accidentally, and actually didn't have control of it anymore. But and then Daryl Cordy, I used to call Daryl Cordy. Daryl Cordy's shop at Freeport and Fruit Ridge, I used to call that, UC Davis East. And I learned more about Syrah from Daryl, but that was, the Northern Rhone Syrahs, the real Syrahs. And that's when I really fell in love with the grape, and I found a way to get some, and I planted it in 75.
And weren't the cuttings from like an overpass or something like that?
Yeah, Doc Olmo got some stuff from Max Chapoutier, I think like in the 40s or the early 50s. Anyway, and the UC Davis Vineyards went further out to the south. And then when they put I-80 through, it cut right through the vineyard, and the state gave them more ground, and the vineyards went to the west. But in a cloverleaf, there were about 100 vines just sitting there. And the graduate students would go out and we would practice pruning. Seriously, you'd park off of the cloverleaf and you'd go out and you'd practice your cane pruning and head pruning, and because there was just nobody cared. Turns out there
were people honking at you.
A couple of the girls thought that I had good legs, but there were 18, 20 vines of Syrah, the Chapoutier clone, in one corner, and Doc almost said, And he had Doc Alley take me out there, and he said, okay, this is Syrah from the Chapoutier Vineyard. It's been growing here now for 10, 12 years. It's clean. It's not in the whatever, the propagation system at Davis. It should have been, but there was a problem with Dr. Goheen, and there's some bad blood there. But anyway, he took me out there. I got a handful of sticks, and I took them down to Doug Meter in Greenfield. This is before Doug Meter had the Ventana Vineyard Winery. He had the December Pacific Nursery. And he, with a handful of sticks, in 18 months, he grew out enough vines for me to plant 20 acres, which I did in 75. Right. And got the first crop in 78.
And now
dating ever since.
Yeah.
I sold Randall Graham I got some great Randall stories, but I sold Randall his first Syrah. And when
I want to dive into that in a second, but Jason, tell us what Gary's Syrah meant for your family when it was deciding where to plant Rhone varieties in California.
Well, it was sort of proof of concept that Paso Robles worked for Rhones. I mean, when we started looking in '85, we looked up and down the state of California, looked in Sonoma, looked in Napa, looked in Sierra Foothills, Contra Costa, and all the way down through the Central Coast. And I mean, one of the places that my dad and the parents visited they visited Gary, and it was an indicator that in this region that people mostly didn't know about yet. And if they did, it certainly wasn't for Rhone varieties, but it was for us. It was, again, that kind of proof that Syrah at least really could work here. And when we planted our first experimental vineyards, while we were still waiting for our own clones to come in from France, we planted Gary's Syrah clone, and on about 2 acres. I've actually opened a bottle of our Syrah, 100% Syrah, which is mostly made still from that same block. It felt like an appropriate thing to do in his honor. So again, both for what he did for Paso and what he did for Syrah in particular, like we're grateful. We stand on the shoulders of those who come before us, and Gary's a big piece of that foundation.
Awesome. Well, I want to keep talking about Syrah because I love Syrah, but we are drinking this wine first for anyone keeping track at home, which is Gary's white Rhone blend, 44% Grenache Blanc, 32% Viognier, 24% Roussanne. Delicious, refreshing wine. But this, before I even really knew that Gary was the one fully behind the Australia clone of Syrah, I heard it from everybody. I mean, when we talked Gary last, you said basically like 60% of the Syrah planted in the United States is probably this clone that came from your initial vineyard. So tell us a little bit about that first winery, and how this grape became the kind of go-to across the country when it comes to Syrah.
Well, real quickly, I came to California from teaching in med school to make Cabernet. And, I love my Cabernet, I do, but I make one Bordelaise wine, and that's Cabernet. I make at least 5, and I've made as many as 8 Rhone varietals. I mean, I don't know how, I was a geneticist. I loved playing doctor. And as a species, over the last 500,000 years as we have evolved, eating fruit, picking up fruit that was fermenting on the ground and sweet and a little alcohol. I think as a species, we've sort of developed this genetic taste for maybe a little alcohol, but also a little bit of big fruit. And let's face it, I mean, the Bordelaise varieties, Cabernet because of its complexity, and I do love my Cab, but the Rhone varieties are, to me, so much more fruity and so much more approachable and so much more food friendly. I just fell in love with them. And from day one, and Syrah did fine. And then my next venture in was Viognier in '92, and then Counoise and Roussanne right after that. And but this wine that we're talking about, it's got the Roussanne in it because I had Howie Steinbeck, he's got his own winery now and a lot of vineyard, but I talked him into planting Roussanne way back when. And I said, Howie, put in 5 acres. I'll buy it. Don't worry about it. And we started making Roussanne, and we were already making. I'd already been making Viognier long enough that I'd learned how to make it. And in the tasting room, you'd be Roussanne and Viognier side by side, and the Viognier would outsell the Roussanne 10-1. And I had to do something with Roussanne, and that's where we came up with the Blanc, with the Grenache Blanc, Viognier, and Roussanne, and it's been a very popular wine for us.
And so Syrah did well for you for about a dozen years, and then you decided, I'm going to go deeper into Rhone. This is what I like. I mean, what made that decision? You just realized you liked the fruit character more, or you thought you needed new wines, or why there?
Well, I mean, I was traveling. I was traveling a lot. I remember my first trip to Condrieu, when there were 2 wines, Chateau Condrieu and Gruyere, and I was just smacked with how great that was. And then Grenache, and and the fruit that you get, not just from Syrah, but it seems like all of the major wines, red and white, out of the Rhone, are just so almost made for a human palate. I mean, they're easy.
Accessible. I like the word accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, very accessible. And it's I've never met I shouldn't say that because I'm not a great fan of Derif. We always bring in a little bit to have a little bit of it on the palate for color or for tannin if it's needed. But the Rhone varieties that I've worked with for 50 years now are just so much fun and so easy. And they love Paso Robles. I mean, Paso Robles, everyone thinks that this is the hottest place in the world. You think it's hot here, go spend a couple of months up in Calistoga.
And when did you see the Rhone train taken off? I mean, you were selling Syrah to Randall Graham and people early on. But was there a point where you said, oh, this is going to be a real category in California?
Well, I was so naive. Like, I mean, at the same time, Randall Graham, I was consulting for Marsh Ream. And then I helped get Ken Brown, that was Zach Mesa, get Ken Brown, the winemaker. And in '78, I planted their Bear Vineyard, which I believe is the oldest continuously planted Syrah vineyard. But at that time, there was Jim Clendenin, Bob Lindquist, Ellen Tomat. I mean, they were the cellar rats. And that was their exposure to Syrah. And I'm sure that Bob's never really complained about me introducing him to Syrah. But
no. Well, and he was the first guy to make Syrah in Santa Barbara County, but it was actually your grapes. It was from Paso Robles grapes.
Yeah, it was that Chapoutier clone. Yeah, the Australia clone, whatever you want to call it. But it does well. I mean, I'm amazed that clone of Syrah it has, in cold climates and in mid climates and hot climates, adapts very well. A lot of grapes don't have quite the range that you see with Syrah. It makes a pretty damn nice wine in a pretty broad spectrum of climates.
Right. I'm moving to your Viognier, Gary, so you can follow me if you'd like. And just to say a few words about your Viognier, I mean, Viognier can be a very kind of big, fruity grape, and I get a lot submitted to me for review that are almost too peachy, but you're able to keep the restraint there and to hold it back. I mean, is that a fine balance there of bringing that fruit to the table, but making sure that it doesn't just blow out the palate?
Yeah, well, I mean, fruit bombs have become very popular with some people, and there was a period, maybe people are starting to look now for more varietal character, but Viognier, I've always said, we're a red wine house. 80% of the wine we make is red. And the 20% that we make that's white, we make it to get red wine stains out of our clothes. But Viognier, damn, it's a nice wine. I mean, it's got that stone fruit character. It's got the viscosity, and it's got, I mean, not everyone, but so many Viogniers that I have tried, whether it's, you know, from Tablas Creek or from wherever. When you first take it in your mouth, after you've smelled it and you take it into your mouth, and you know it's dry, and yet you take it in and it gives you a quick impression of, I think it's because it's so fruity that it gives you the impression of a little bit of sweetness there, but yet it's dry. And I don't do many, you know, wine food combinations. I think we overdo it, but I'll tell you what, sea scallops and Viognier, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
it's also a very good kind of introductory wine for people that are just getting into wine tasting. You know, it's the flavors are familiar, and it kind of pulls you along into, you know, into other wines as you go forward.
It's sort of the Chenin Blanc of the 70s was that wine. You know, now you've got Viognier. You know, I thought Viognier could never be really successful because of the name. You know, I mean, Viognier does not roll off an Anglo's tongue very easily.
Right.
But the wine, I always said it had the Gewürztraminer complex, but the wine is so good that Americans, they don't come in asking for Viognier anymore. They know it's Viognier. I mean, the wine was too good for it not to become popular.
Yeah. Well, there's another success story, another notch for your belt there, Gary. I want to, you know, I love hearing about your stories of growing up and football. I mean, wine was not something that was on your family table in Western Pennsylvania, was it?
No, I would say once Christmas and once at Thanksgiving, when we had our family get-togethers and annual fights. You know, Thanksgiving was when we had the preliminaries to see what the main events would be at Christmas. There would be a bottle of dessert wine or something, and it would still be there at Easter. No, I mean, I wasn't a teetotaler. Our family was pretty damn close to it. And then when I went to college, I never really started drinking. And then I started discovering.
And you went to, didn't you go to Tulane first?
No, Penn State.
No. Penn State. Okay, why did I? Yeah, sorry.
Then
so,
LSU.
Yeah, Penn State. Then LSU. That's what I was thinking. So yeah, Penn State's where you went for football, right?
Right.
And is that what kept you off drinking? Was the morning workouts or?
No, I can tell you, I can remember both the first and second times I ever got drunk. And those were the last two times, because I don't get up the next morning and say, hey, it's a nice day. The two times I got drunk, man, it took me like a week to recover. But I was not a drinker. And when I started drinking wine, I'm married, I'm down in graduate school now, National Science Fellow, you know, doing genetics and publishing papers and journals. And I would drink the finest wines of the time. Well, I mean, I drank a lot of Boone Farm, Strawberry Hill, you know, no alcohol in it, just the sweet that I was talking about. But if I wanted to impress somebody, we would serve them Mateus or Lancers, maybe Blue Nun, because, you know, in 1970, if you didn't have an empty bottle of Mateus on your dining room table with a candle in it, you know, you were living in a single wide. You know, it was a sign that you were a cultured individual.
Nice.
And one of my professors down at the med school, he and I both loved opera. And once a month or so, we'd get together and the wives would cook dinner, and then they'd go over to wherever the Chippendales were dancing. And we would take a couple bottles of wine and listen to opera. And like I said, I used to serve, you know, her, you know, Mateus and Lancers. And I'd go to his house in 66 Chateau Latour and Beaucaillou and Margaux and Lynch Bosch. I'm going, man, this guy, he doesn't understand what wine is. I mean, come on, Neil Diamond's singing about Cracklin' Rosie. you know.
He's got all this French stuff. What's he know? Yeah.
But he won, and I decided, I don't want to be a geneticist. I'm going to be a winemaker. And I came to California, went to David. I was, qualified, published papers. I had patents in genetics. I was one of 140 National Science Fellows in the United States. My credentials said, okay, no problem.
And did your Napa friends then think you were crazy when you went south? I mean, did they assume you'd stay up there?
I look at my classmates, Mary Edwards, Steve McRosty, Dave Whitehouse, Randall Johnson, Andy Quaddy. Of course, he went to the Valley for his dessert wines. But, so many of them, and they all stayed north, and they went working for somebody else. And I knew that I wanted my own winery. But I came to California. I'd been a pretty wealthy graduate student because of the National Science Fellowship, but I had a 7-year-old Pontiac and a U-Haul full of hand-me-down furniture, maybe $1,000, $1,500, but this was 1971, so it was a lot more than it is today. But I knew even then I couldn't afford to play the game in Napa. That just wasn't possible. And when Doc Olmo and Doc Alley, we were doing these soil analysis trips down to the Central Coast, looking for the next Napa Sonoma and taking soil samples back to the soil science department. I recognized one, thanks to them, but I was paying attention, that Paso Robles had the potential to be really a spectacular region for growing Vitis vinifera. And the other thing was, it was a place where I could afford to play the game, where I could afford to buy the ground. And if I got good partners and a big mortgage, which I was able to succeed in doing, that I could eventually have my own winery. And that's one, you look at the diurnal swing down here and the types of soils that we have down here. It just says Vitis vinifera. It's just, and we have, well, anyway, I think it's, there's so much down here that is going on that says, hey, you made the right decision. So I'm happy.
Yeah, no, and you've proven it, and Paso Robles is now a Rhone hotbed of the world, I would say. They're getting so much attention, and the wines are delicious and complex. And now, thanks in part to the Haas family at Tablas Creek, they're planting all types of Rhone varieties that most of us have never heard of either. So it's not an ending story. The story's just starting and still going here. So I'm going to pour some of this rosé. I don't know if you're moving there too, Gary. Tell us a little bit about rosé. Were you early to that train too? Were you always making some rosé?
I started making rosés back in the 70s, but they were primarily Zinfandel rosés.
Were they dry? Or?
Yeah, well, my original ones were dry, but when white Zinfandel, boom, hit, and they became the blush wine, and everybody expected your rosé to be slightly sweet. And I refused to make that, although once I got started under my label, I bought some wine from Neil's, Tommy Myers was the winemaker over at Castoro, and I bought some white Zinfandel because you had to have it in your tasting room. People really expected it at that point. But now my rosé is dry. I think, one of the least appreciated wines or grapes in California until recently, because it was the valley grape, Barbera and Grenache were valley grapes. How can you not like Grenache? And our rosé is essentially Grenache, and you see, because we always put on a label, and it's Syrah and Viognier. And the Viognier, there's just a little bit of Viognier, 3-5%, is like throwing a light switch on red grapes or a lid. It just
pops it up.
it just brightens. Yeah, it's amazing how little it takes to just brighten that fruit. But you know, Grenache has got that strawberry character. I mean, it's you know, Zinfandel is raspberry, you know, Cabernet Cassis, but Grenache, and it's got strawberry.
And when did you see the Grenache movement start happening? Was that later into the 90s or not even that early?
Yeah, I made my first. I made you know, varietal Mourvèdre and varietal Grenaches, and I still have bottles of it in my cellar because I hold on to everything. But they were. I seem to always be just a skosh too early, or not have quite the marketing money and you know mechanisms behind me. But I made varietal Grenache, and I love the wine. I really did. I like it, and it was sort of my bistro or luncheon wine. But in the 90s, it was a hard sell. It really was, because there weren't many people selling varietal Grenache. And again, I had made a commitment to a grower that, and I tell these guys, I said, hey, you plant this for me, I will buy them. And you know, I've always honored that. But when I found that it was harder to sell, I said, okay, well, what I need, and when I quit with Counoise, was a rosé, because I knew I could see rosé coming up as a very strong contender in the marketplace. And I said, you know, Grenache is the wine. It will grow, and we pop a little Syrah into it, a little Viognier, and it's been, you know. Everybody thinks we're a big winery, and our total production is 28. Well, I should say, we average 28,000. We say we're a 30,000 case winery, but we've never been there. But our average over the last 8 years has been right at 28,000 cases. And we don't have a single wine that we have a 12-month supply of. We sell out of everything we have. And the rosé is probably gone in 4 months, 5 months, maybe, except that we always hold back one pallet. And actually my marketing, my major domo here is held back a pallet and a half, 84 cases of the rosé. And we release it again on November 1st. Because I say, you know, for an American Thanksgiving, if you're looking for a wine, because it's one wine with all the food at one time, you know, a good dry fruity rosé is as good as you're going to get, or maybe a light Pinot Noir.
Yeah, no, and I think Grenache. I taste a lot of rosés over the course of a year, and I think Grenache most consistently makes the best rosé as a base. Pinot actually makes a decent rosé too, but I think Grenache is more of the workhorse.
I mean, I've not made rosés from all the grapes, but I'll tell you what, I agree with you 100%, Matt. If you're going to make a rosé, a nice dry rosé that's going to please everybody, I don't think you can come up with something better than Grenache.
Right,
certainly, right. It's not Counoise.
Yeah. It sounded like you had trouble selling Counoise by itself back in the 90s.
Actually, it was a pretty nice wine, but it just again, I was a little too early on that puppy.
Right.
I'm glad to see Counoise now coming up, and they're making it into a nice, you know, red wine. I mean, which is, I think, where the guy I had growing it, just, it wasn't ever going to be a great red wine.
Right. I'm going to shift to your red Rhone here, the Paso Robles. And then I also have a surprise for you here. I'm going to have to share my screen. And we have a guest video coming on here. So that's right. I got to take these off so this works. Go.
I'm Jerry Lohr of J. Lohr Winery, Vineyards Winery. And I want to congratulate Gary Eberle, our friend and neighbor here in Paso Robles. If you look at my license plate, I was interested in Cabernet, but I started in Monterey County. But as I saw that Monterey was too cool to properly ripen Cabernet, I came down to Paso Robles. Why did I come to Paso Robles? Because a couple of local fellows down here, Gary Eberle being one, were making really outstanding Cabernets from here. So that was Gary, who not only did he make good wine, but he flew his plane, he went around the country, and he became a personality. But after a while, by Gary, and quite early, really, thought, gee whiz, there's more to this world than Cabernet. I'm going to try Syrah. And so he saw Syrah, he liked it. And so he really has been the godfather, and other people have picked up since. But Gary is kind of, in my mind, the godfather of Syrah in this area. And so that's where he's unique. You know, he was a tackle, a football player. He went through the Ph.D. program, but didn't get a Ph.D. I went through the Ph.D. program at Stanford, but didn't get a Ph.D. So we have some things in common, except I'm a civil engineer. He's a biologist or so. But we have something in common also. We really love wine. And so I can't say enough to thank Gary for all he has done in the last many years to bring Rhone wines, and now accepting this honor from the Rhone Rangers for Paso Robles. So this is just another way that Gary is helping put Paso Robles on the map. I'm proud to give that thanks to him.
You know, Jerry and I are good friends, and I will tell you, and I mean this most sincerely, I'm not making it up, the Lohr family are without a doubt some of the nicest people in the industry. And I will tell you, and I don't mean in Paso Robles, I mean in the industry. And the other thing is, you know, dollar for dollar, you know, I hate them because they are such the exception to the rule. They make wine on a very large scale. I mean, I'm a drop in the bucket compared to what they do. But dollar for dollar, you can't beat them. Their wines right down the line are apt. I mean, it's amazing. I keep wanting to say, you know, they're not, you know, I can't compete with them on several levels, but I mean, nicest people, and making wine of the quality that they do on a level that they do is, it defies everything I ever learned in this industry. And they're nice people. Jerry and Laura, Steve and Cynthia, they're just nice people. They're nice people.
Yeah, no, I've been impressed with them throughout. And again, those, even the cheapest end of their wines are competing way higher than their price point. You know, whether it's the Merlot, the Syrah, Cabernet. And Jerry wanted to be here, but they had some big sales meetings. So they said, can we send a video? And I said, that'd be great. I'm glad they did, because I think that was a worthy tribute to you from one of your cohorts and friends. And I kind of want to go back to, you know, even not just Rhones, but your promotion of Paso Robles and how you took cues from Robert Mondavi. I mean, he knew that for himself to be successful, he needed Napa to be successful. And so that's what you've done, I think, for Paso Robles, you know, as strong as anyone. So was that a tough battle? I mean, when you were going out originally, did people know what Paso Robles was?
Oh, no, I mean, when I started, I mean, I knew we had the potential to make great wine. And I'm thinking, well, if you make great wine, people are going to immediately recognize it. That's great until you go out and try to sell it in New York and in Miami and Washington and Atlanta. Good wine, but Paso Robles, is that in Texas? Is that in Baja, California? And I mean, it became very apparent to me very early on that for Eberle Winery to succeed, Paso Robles had to succeed. It was a chicken or an egg. they had to come up together. And, you know, I get this thing, you know, I'm not the one that started it, didn't start my winery, you know, the godfather of Paso Robles, because I knew how important it was for Paso Robles to be recognized as a superior grape growing region. Now, I never expected to take over Napa, because Napa had, you know, some pretty, you know, with Heights and Mondavi and Winarski, I mean, some great people up there, Randy Dunn making great wines. But I knew that we needed to at least be able to compete with Sonoma. And, you know, and we've never quite achieved what they do with both Pinot Noir and with Zinfandel. So we're looking at, you know, what do we do well? Well, we do Cabernet very well. And we do Rhone varieties. They love Paso Robles. They like our deep subsoils. That's just where I went. And I didn't promote, I wasn't being altruistic. I was doing what I had to do to make Eberle successful, and to make Eberle successful, I had to make Paso Robles successful.
Right. While we're drinking this red blend, tell me a little bit about, you know, Rhone blends. When did you start hitting the market with the Rhone blend? I mean, did people understand what that was when you came out, or were they like, what is this mishmash?
Yeah, you know, in my label, a couple of things. You know, my label is the same label from 1979. Again, channeling Mr. Mondavi. Once your label, I don't care how ugly it is, don't change it. That's Mr. Mondavi.
The styles change, so occasionally you're like on the front end of the style thing, you know.
Yeah. But I've only patented and copyrighted 2 labels, and one was the Côte de Robles. I thought, man, that is just the perfect. You're from Paso Robles, Côte de Robles. I mean, and we were doing it sort of tongue in cheek, but I said, man, because someone's going to steal that, and I said, no, I'm going to patent it, and this is what I call, this is our bistro wine. It's our lightest red. It is, you know, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, and we actually have to pump just a little de Rief most years into it, 2 or 3% for color, because, you know, Grenache doesn't have quite the color that, just to pump it up a little bit, and we like it. We make about 2,000 cases a year, and it sells out, let's say, typically in about 8 months.
And you drink this with everything. I mean, you were saying we probably spend too much time talking about pairings as a culture, but this goes with almost everything. I mean, you're talking chicken, pork, beef, fish to some extent too, you know.
You know, if you don't like my rosé for Thanksgiving, this is this. But if you don't like my rosé, I would probably run down real quick to a light Pinot Noir, something like. Remember when Sainsbury was making their Garnet? You know, that light
the Garnet,
Dead Graves, and that was a really nice wine, a Thanksgiving. But I think rosé, because it doesn't overpower turkey, but it'll stand up to sweet potatoes, and grandmother's Jello mold that crawls onto your plate. You know, and it looks festive on the table in a holiday setting. But the Côte de Robles is our bistro, or my summertime red. You can chill it down because it's just got, you know, it's chock full of fruit. You can chill it down a little bit, a little colder than you would normally drink a red wine, and it's still very nice.
Yeah, and you don't. You're not bottling straight Mourvèdre. I don't think you have a Mourvèdre. And do you not even?
I made a couple of Mourvèdres way back. But again, I keep saying that I was too early with some of these wines, and you'd go out with Mourvèdre, and people would say, "What the hell is this?" And then, you know, instead of selling some Cabernet and some Chardonnay, and I would spend all my time explaining what it was, and you only got, 12 minutes, with a wine buyer at a store or a restaurant. and I
You
was
stick to
spending,
your good guns.
yeah. So so again, and we like working with it. I mean, I've got, you know, down in my personal cellar, I've got standalone Grenache and standalone Mourvedre. I still have some Crunoise. I still have some of my very first Syrahs from 78 and 79.
And how are those doing? You know, I'm going to move to your 2019 Steinbeck Syrah, and I have some pictures I'm going to jump to as you're talking. But this is from Steinbeck Vineyard, which is near your spot, and you've been working with forever. But how are those old Syrahs doing? I'm assuming they're holding up pretty well.
The 78, which was my first vintage, is not holding up. It was the first crop off of those vines, and not holding up quite as well as I would expect. But the 79 is holding up very well and still quite nice. Not maybe to the same extent that Cabernet will, you know, hang in there, but
Let's talk about Steinbeck Vineyard here.
Steinbeck is the now I think the second oldest Syrah continuously planted Syrah vineyard in the U.S. I planted it in 1980, and at that time it was the 8th Syrah vineyard that I had planted. The early ones at Estrella, which was where I first planted my first 3 vineyards.
Those are ripped out now or developed?
Yeah, they were all on their own roots.
Mm-hmm.
And they got phylloxera when things moved on, and they had to be ripped up, replanted. The Steinbeck Vineyard is also unrooted, and the Bear Vineyard down at Zaca Mesa is unrooted, just like my Cabernet here on my estate vineyard is unrooted. But
and this is before we move away from the pictures. This is the owner of Steinbeck, right?
Right. That's Howie Steinbeck and his daughter, and Brian,
new employee with you.
Yeah, but good people, farmers. They've been in Paso Robles longer than Paso Robles existed. I mean, they've been here forever. Essentially, dry farm farmers and running a little bit of cattle, but primarily dry farm.
And quite a nice slope action. And you find that important with Syrah? I mean, does that add a lot to the finished wine, the topography?
Yeah. And again, it's that very typical Paso soil. We don't have any topsoil over here, but we've got 20 foot of subsoil. We've got all the calcareous slates and shales, and a lot of decomposed granite, very porous soils, drains well. But we have, thank God, because you could not, there are places on the west side of town, because they've got heavier soils, more clay, and they get so much more rain. You can actually dry farm some stuff over there, but a little bit of irrigation helps. We, like my vineyard here, my 40 acres, I couldn't keep the vines alive, let alone get a crop on them, unless I irrigated. And to this day, water is still the most, I mean, I own the water, it's under my ground, we lift it. But wells are 850 foot to 1,000 foot, and we pump at least from 450. And a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds, and we pump it up, and we're pumping 550 gallons a minute. So every time I hit the button, PG&E sends me a thank you note, and a really nice Christmas gift every year.
And what's your, prognosis on that? I mean, are you pessimistic, optimistic? I mean, what do you think is going on?
Oh boy, that's a good question, because Paso, particularly the east side of town, which overlies the basin, it's the second largest aquifer west of the Mississippi. Only the Ogallala in Nebraska is a larger aquifer. And when I came to Paso, there was on this side of town, they were doing a lot of alfalfa, about 15,000 acres, a a lot of different crops that actually required quite a bit of water. Sugar beets. I mean, Paso was growing sugar beets. Well, they're using 3.5 acre foot of water per acre. Grapes, now that we've learned a little bit over the last 5 decades, and we drip. I use, depending on the year, somewhere between 0.8 and 0.85 acre foot. Grapes are one of the most penurious crops when it comes to water. Things like almonds, alfalfa, row crops, sugar, they take a lot of water. Grapes really don't need much. And the Europeans over about a couple millennia have learned, plant your trees, your almonds, your olives, your grapes, the deep-rooted things up on the hillsides, because they want poor soil. The roots will go down, they'll find the water, and you let the valley floors, that's where you plant your tomatoes and your asparagus and your green peppers, whatever, because they only root in 12 inches. Our root zone is 20 foot. So, the water that we do get in the winter, a lot of it sticks around, the vines chase it down, and we just have to supplement. And people say you want to stress your vines. No, you don't want to stress them. You want to challenge them. There's a difference. Stressing gives you inferior fruit. Challenging them really gives you the best fruit.
There's a question I've always wanted to ask you. It's not off topic, but you have a winemaker named Chris Eberle, who's of no relation to you. How the hell did that happen?
I'm absolutely sure somewhere back in Germany, a couple of centuries ago, I'm sure we have a common ancestor, but no, Chris and I are, he did, because he was, he did a 23andMe, and we did, the whole chromosome. No, I mean, we're not related. We have no common relative in the United States. His family was here actually in California before I ever had a relative. My grandparents came over in 1881 with a group of about 500 Germans from Ludwigsburg, Stuttgart area. He was 7, she was 5. They grew up together. The men went to the steel mills, and they grew up, eventually got married. And then my father was their 7th and last child. And then my mother was born in Poland. So I'm half Polish, half German. I want to conquer the world, but I can't remember why. And and Chris, he's from Hamburg. His answer, and I'm going, man, that's because Eberle is a Schwabish name. The little boar, the young boar, the son of the boar. That's the translation. And he says he comes from Hamburg. And I'm going, must have been a bad Eberle that got, exiled up north. But no, but I'll tell you what, he is the best winemaker I've ever been around. And Tom Myers, I used to always say Tom Myers was the best winemaker in Paso Robles. And Tom Myers is still, I think, one of my favorite winemakers in Paso Robles. But Chris, he's got his degree, got his advanced degree. He's made wine, and he worked as a cellar rat, and then went on a 6-year, 9 harvest, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany. Just all over the world, working crushes back and forth across the equator. And I'm stunned by this stuff. And, he'll sit down and, we'll be tasting wines and stuff. And I said, well, where did you get oh, that was when I was in Germany. This was something, or I was in Australia, and he did a cut cane Chardonnay. Cut cane Chardonnay, what the is cut cane Chardonnay? And
that's great.
And we made holy cow, we released it, and it disappeared in like 17 seconds. It was amazing. And all these different things. He has now started a cellular of Muscat Canelli, outside in barrels, and he plans to make a Portuguese style setubal. And I'm going, well, where'd you get it? Well, he said, well, I've never really been Portuguese, but because we have Wine Wednesday, and every Wednesday he gets the keys to my house. He goes down into my cellar, my personal cellar, and he brings up 4 or 5 bottles. And there's a group of about 12 people. We sit around, and whatever he brings up, he brought up an old setubal. He had never had one. Now I have
now you're making it.
But it's amazing. Like, you know, I mean, I remember when I was making wine, I think I had 7 different yeast strains. He's got almost 60. And I mean, it's not fair.
Well,
it's not fair.
But it's keeping it interesting for you, right? I mean, you're still super engaged, and
you know, I'm sneaking up on 78. I'm having a good time. I'm at the winery every day. And Chris and my people keep me young. I've got the best paid people in the industry, full medical, full dental, full optical, bonuses every month. We at the end of the year, for every dollar they put into an IRA or 401k, I match it to the maximum I'm allowed by law, which is about a third.
Yeah.
You know, it's just free money. And my people are so good. If you come to my winery, one, we don't charge to taste. Again, channeling Mr. Mandavi. Don't ever, this is Mr. Mandavi, don't ever charge to taste. You make your wines good enough that you don't have to say, okay, we're going to charge you $10, but if you buy something, we'll credit it to you. He says, don't bribe people. Make your wines so good that they will buy them.
That's extremely rare these days. Like, that's so rare, you might be the only one doing that.
I hope not. I don't think so. But I mean, and as long as I'm alive, we will never charge for tasting, because our wines sell because they're good. And the other thing is, we're one of the last wineries that do tours. I mean, it costs me on my insurance to take people on tours, because, you know, used to be every winery did tours. Well, the lawyers, you know, if you saw what I have to pay to take people on the industrial floor, but I think it's worth it. I think you know, as people come along, you've got to educate them on how wine is made, and we take them from the vineyard to the crush pad to the fermentation cellar down to the caves.
There's the caves right there. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got more we got more underground square footage than we do in the winery building itself.
And they get to see your football jersey in pictures too.
Oh yeah, handsome man, handsome man.
That's great. So if you let's fast forward 50 years, you're probably not going to live to 130. So let's just assume that.
I hope not.
Fast forward 50 years. What do you want people to remember Gary Eberle by, and what's the best case scenario for what your winery looks like at that time?
Oh boy, I think I want people to remember that at Eberle Winery they got a very good wine at a very fair price. You know, we're not the least expensive wine, but we're certainly not the most expensive. I think wine, you know, you rent a bottle of, I mean, you drink a bottle of wine, you rent it for 4 hours. If it's Cabernet, in 4 hours, you make a bottle of Chardonnay out of it. It's just, come on, it's a bottle of wine. It makes food taste better. It makes friends friendlier. It makes mother-in-laws palatable. I mean, it's wine. And I think of the alcoholic beverages that are normally out there, I think it is the most social. And at the same time, you know, interesting. I mean, you can be intellectually challenged by wine, and a lot of people aren't. I mean, other beverages really don't. They're just beverages. But personally, the things that I'm proudest of, the scholarships that I endow at 2 universities, And I started an organization called the Winemaker Cook-Off here in Paso 22 years ago now, when I was head of president of Rotary. And we now have, and we raise money for scholarships to the local high school. And it's an opportunity for my industry, because we're constantly asking for charity donations to this and that, and everybody does. But this is an opportunity for my industry in Paso Robles to give back to our community. And we've got a foundation now that's got $2 million in it. And we just had our winemaker cook-off last week. And I think because our next set of scholarships will go out in May, June, when the school graduates. And I'm very confident right now that we will be able to give $100,000 this year in scholarships to the local high school.
Yeah.
Scholarships are very important to me.
That's great. Yeah.
It's the only way I was going to a steel mill. It hadn't been for football. But
well, and that relates to a question actually we have from the crowd, from Bill McCormick, and he's wondering, did you ever find any wine drinkers in Western Pennsylvania? Did you introduce them to wine? Did you make that a wine region, or not quite?
Bill McCormick was a classmate of mine, and I remember he gave me my high school nickname, and it was my best friend in high school. And no, I mean, we were. I mean, I look back, I'm going, man, we were goody two shoes. We didn't drink. We cut class. I remember once, or our senior year, went to the Pittsburgh Zoo, but no, we were. Looking back, I'm thinking, geez, we really were. I mean, we rarely did anything that you'd consider.
Yeah, you cut class to go to the zoo. That's pretty innocent.
But I do. Oh, I got a long. I remember Bill lived on a dairy farm, and I remember coming home one night, and his driveway was up, and there was a little hill, and down below was a fence, a little electric fence, and it was late at night. We were driving or something, and I couldn't wait to get home, and I did the dumb thing where you stand out there on this hill, and I sent a stream over the hill and it crossed the fence, and it knocked me on my butt, and everybody thought that was really funny, except for me. But we didn't drink. I mean, I don't remember in high school ever drinking anything alcoholic. And
yeah,
got to Penn State a little bit, but not much.
Yeah. Well, you've introduced an entire multiple generations of people to drinking fine wines and drinking to improve their lives and their enjoyability of life, and also for opening our eyes to the potential for Syrah in California and the Central Coast, particularly, and Paso Robles. I mean, none of this would be the same without you, Gary. So I think I can speak for everyone on this Zoom seminar, whatever you want, webinar, I guess it's called, and watching on Facebook, to say congratulations for winning this Lifetime Achievement Award. No one really deserves it more than you. So,
thank you. And I want to thank you, Matt, because and the wine enthusiast, because I don't think there's a publication, a wine publication, that has paid quite as much attention to Paso Robles as the enthusiast has. And it has helped us a lot over the last couple of decades. It really has. And we appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, it's a great region to cover. I mean, there's a lot happening. It's interesting. People are doing new stuff. And then you have legends like yourself that are there holding up the flame for everyone. So,
well, the other thing that really helped, and then particularly for the Rhone movement, was when Robert and the Friends and Jason, came to Paso, and they added such a degree of legitimacy to the Rhone movement here in Paso Robles. I don't think we'd be anywhere further along than we are. But because of Bob and the friends and
Yeah.
really good
No,
people.
you were step one for Syrah and Rhones in Paso and Central Coast, and to some extent even California, and they were definitely a big step too in making it stick and opening doors even more stuff. So it was great to have Jason on here too.
Yeah. Come on out sometime every afternoon. I mean, literally every afternoon, I'm sitting out front greeting people, harassing them with.
I want to try some of that quinoa that's down there from whenever I'm excited to check that out, and even some of the old, that old Syrah I think would be pretty fascinating.
Well, I think the old Syrah would be more. And you remind me when you come, I will do it. I don't know that I want to show you the 78. But the 79, pretty good. Pretty good still.
Cool. Well, congratulations, Gary. I don't know if I don't think any of the Rhone's people are jumping back on, so I think it's just me signing off here. But again, congratulations, Gary. Thank you to everyone for watching. I hope you learned something. You definitely learned that Gary is a great guy and ready to host you and pour some of his wines for free, which honestly, I don't know if you know, Gary, no one really does that anymore, but I'm so proud that you do.
That's a shame. Like I said, I've had 3 mentors, Mondavi, Paterno, and somebody you don't know. But I learned so much about my industry and what I do today from Robert Mondavi. I mean, you talk about a giant in an industry. He was the Carnegie of the wine industry. I mean, he really put us not just Mondavi or Napa, but California on the map. He sort of drug us into the 21st century. I don't want to say single-handedly, but he did probably more. And I revere. I mean, so much of what I do, so much of my success, I've got to go back to guys like Paterno and Robert Mondavi.
Well, Gary, when they carve that Mount Rushmore of wine, I think your face is going to be up there next to Mondavi. So,
Matt.
Anyway.
Pax Vobiscum. It's been good seeing you. Come on and drink some wine with me.
Congratulations and go Rhone.
Yeah, and the next time you come, I'll let you listen to my dog sing.
Oh, we didn't get to hear that, but that's.
Oh, you want to hear it?
Maybe we'll go out with the serenade. Yeah.
They just left. Hey. Okay, never mind.
All right.
Oh, here they come. Here they come.
But they're not going to sing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. That's one of the pieces. That's the introduction to Cavalleria, the opera Cavalleria Rusticana. I don't know why.
And they stop on cue. That's amazing.
Pieces of music that kicks them off on this. It's weird.
I have to say I've done a lot of Zoom things over the past year and a half, very long year and a half, but we've never finished anything with the dog serenade. So maybe you need another award. We'll add another award to your show.
Next time you're in town, come on over.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. And thanks, Rhone Rangers, for having us. And thanks for everyone for watching.
Bye-bye.